You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
Greetings one and all, and welcome to a delayed reaction chat for episodes 5 and 6 of Star Wars Andor, brought to you by those freedom fighters over at fanfortracks.com. This week we saw the conclusion of the Aldhani heist trilogy as a big day is finally here, and after the previous week's episode, Cassian has gained the confidence of some of the crew. As the Aldhani natives finish their pilgrimage just hours before the celestial event known as the Eye of Aldhani is due to commence, the heist team led by Vel part ways to head towards their various infiltration points so they can get inside the Imperial garrison and steal all that lovely Imperial money. Joining me this week to bisect the 2 episodes, and probably not in a linear fashion, is the travelling fanfare jet-lagged from New York Comic Con. It's Mr. Mark Newbold. Mark, how you doing, buddy? How's things?
I'm very well. Things are good. Busy as always. Had a decent trip to New York Comic Con. Lots of coverage on the site from that, so that was good fun, which is why we never did this last week. So many apologies to the universe. But looking forward to diving into these 2 episodes, The Axe Forgets and The Eye, both in their own way. Excellent episodes of Andor, I think.
This is now really the second story block that we've had complete from Andor Season 1. And so far, both story blocks have followed a fairly similar 2-episode build-up, 3rd episode climax. We're now halfway through the series, so this is a halfway point. We've got another 6 episodes to go, so It's going to be interesting to see if this 2-block then 1 conclusion is going to kind of follow throughout the series. And the question I have to begin with, actually, is do you think that maybe for Season 1 we could get away with it, but, going into then Season 2 and what have you, is this going to start to maybe be a little bit too formulaic?
I think it's working. One thing that struck me is that Season 2, they've said, Tony Gilroy has said that it is essentially 4 trilogies of episodes, and each trilogy of episodes takes place over a year. And it's not that long since Kathleen Kennedy said, we want to get away from trilogies with Star Wars. There's no prerequisite reason why everything has to be a trilogy. And she's right. And then weirdly, Andor ends up being little collections of trilogies. It could be the case that you have an establishing episode and a slower episode, then the action episode. And if that is the case, then I think quite understandably people will grumble. But by the same token, what they've done, certainly with this second trilogy of episodes, has worked really well. As I say, I was out the country, I was still following stuff on social media and saw The Axe Forgets when I was over there. Greatly enjoyed it, but it's certainly a slow episode. So for The Eye, that was such an impactful episode, visually just beautiful, really picked up the story, very Rogue One in its willingness to do away with characters that we've kind of quite intimately got to know in their circumstance. It was really good, but from my understanding is episode 7 will sort of be almost a standalone bridge episode to the next 3, and then the final 2 will wrap up Season 1, so it might not be quite the 3 structure that we've got used to, but nevertheless, yeah, I think it's worked well. What did you think of, well, we're talking about 2 episodes here, we're talking about Chapter 5 and Chapter 6, so first off, The Axe Forgets, what was your sort of thoughts on that?
For me, anyway, the Andor series so far has got a very similar kind of pacing to what you'd almost expect in a book. I like very much like a James Luceno type Star Wars story. Slightly reminds me of Catalyst in some respects. And I really like that because I think actually what we're doing is we're having these opportunities to slow down and actually learn more about the characters. So therefore we do care about. Let's completely contrast this with the 4th episode of Kenobi, where they go to the Citadel and they get rescued. And then obviously there's that one rebel pilot who buys it at the end, and you've only had one scene with him, and it's like, they're all really down about the fact that this dude's died. He only had 2 lines. He was like the Kenobi equivalent of Dak. This is almost like the counter point to that. And for me, I think I really enjoy it. I mean, there are some interesting things, some people are expecting to see stormtroopers all over the place and other people want to see Jedi. Now, I don't think we're going to see Jedi in this whatsoever unless it's a Sith Lord. However, the stormtrooper thing I think is interesting because I think by not having stormtroopers and by having like soldiers or grunts and that who you can see their faces has humanized that garrison completely. So actually, it's a lot more personal, and this is the thing, isn't it? This is kind of one way that Lucas gets around the wars in Star Wars because actually they're faceless stormtroopers, so the body count is almost immaterial because it's removed from reality. Whereas, we're seeing these people and, we're seeing them place a back and not literally go for a leak. Well, they are, they do literally go for a leak. We just don't literally see them go for a leak. It's that whole interesting thing of like, everybody's got this kind of extra sense of humanity. So therefore, the conversations that Claremore Andor has with Nemec about but the Empire doesn't know your name and stuff like that kind of resonates, I think, a little bit more. If you take The Axe Forgets as a single episode, you could be forgiven to go, well, not a lot really happened. But I think if you were to skip over that episode, I think you're going to miss quite a bit. Because, I mean, for starters, we start off really by seeing, like, Cyril Khan and, his whole home life with, his mother. We haven't gone back to him yet. It's going to be interesting to see if we kind of jump back to him to like next week and where he's progressed from that. What his uncle is, what his uncle can give him. So yeah, it was an important episode to have. But I mean, I saw it in HDR here at home. As you could possibly imagine, that whole meteor shout, quite possibly the most beautiful bits of CG I think I've ever seen in Star Wars. I mean, it's close to. There's one episode of Rebels where they kind of went into a kind of very similar kind of multicolored kind of like nebula, which was stunning. But this was just absolutely breathtaking.
I think what you said about The Axe Forgets is spot on because that Kenobi episode is a really good example, actually. There was that character that dies and everyone's upset at the the airspeeder moment. And really, as a viewer, I didn't give a crap. It meant nothing to me. I'm not associated, no connection to the character. Everyone's upset, and I'm like, you've not earned that moment at all. And there's too many modern shows in the last 10 years that have had moments like that when it's like, you've not earned any emotion from me. I don't care about this person. That person means nothing. And they've not even lightly sketched it. The thing about The Axe Forgets was that a lot of it was on Old Arnie, and it was that sort of rural setting, in the Highlands, as they really shouldn't have called it the Highlands because it was actually shot in the Highlands, but there you go. And you learn about Skeen and you learn about his thoughts and you're learning more about Nemec, like you're saying, his manifesto, as he calls it. It's a Rogue One prequel, so it's not going to end well for 9 out of 10 people. There's really only a handful of the characters who are kind of removed on Coruscant that we know are going to get through. We're going to be seeing some of them in Return of the Jedi and onwards. And Andor himself, you're a rock fan. There's certain Maiden albums where there's certain tracks on a Maiden album, like Sea of Madness on Somewhere in Time. Sea of Madness on its own is an okay track. When you play the album and that track plays before Heaven Can Wait, it's the perfect tee-up for Heaven Can Wait. And I think The Axe Forgets is the perfect tee-up for the eye because it eases you into it. You now give a crap. So when the stuff that we're mixing the episodes, but when the stuff that happens, for example, to Nemec on the ship with all the money, the money crate sort of slams into him, this guy is in this cause for the right reasons and he cares and he wants to win. There's all these little moments that mean something, whereas without an episode like The Axe Forgets, as slow as it was, might not mean anything. And back to that kitchen table scene you just mentioned with Cyril and his mom. What kind of a life did that kid have? He clearly thinks he can do more. He's been spoke down to his whole life. We haven't gone back to him yet. Just that little character study in the most mundane circumstances of just sitting at the kitchen table eating your frosted shreddies or whatever the hell he was eating, that moment was kind of cool. But in isolation, if you're just coming in expecting lightsabers and TIE fighters...
But that's fine. You could sometimes say that Star Wars is always like the dessert that you always want, but then every now and again you do need a bit of meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
You really do, to balance it out, and it's all about a healthy, nutritious diet, be it with blue milk and Cocoa Puffs or or something else. But I think it's all about contrast, isn't it? And they've been doing this really well in this series. In this, in this episode, you've got Cyril Khan and his mother, and then you've also got Mon Mothma at her breakfast table, and the strife that is going on there, and you could almost say that Cyril Khan's mother is, well, she's a little bit domineering as such. She's kind of supporting him to a degree, and she's pushing him out there. Whereas obviously Mon Mothma's, her daughter is an angsty teenager and doesn't want to be seen with her, and obviously her husband is the least supportive husband or spouse I think I've seen in Star Wars.
Oh, that
And we
scene
don't
where
tend
he's
to
just
see
sitting
many.
there smirking. You want to slap him, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And this is kind of where I'm hoping that something more will come from his character per se, in respects that like there is, maybe he is the inside man in the Mothma household. If we jump to like the eye, so the next episode, you've then got the contrast between the selflessness of people like Nemec. They want to change the galaxy for the better, not because it's going to make them money, because they're not part of a corporation, not because it's going to improve their standing in the Empire, like the General or even Deidre from ISB.
Yeah.
But just because it's the right thing to do. And then you contrast that with the selfishness of those Imperials. The fat guy who basically blames the way his belt was folded, why it doesn't fit him. And it's like, that is the quintessential way of depicting how somebody is greedy, and obviously, their own hubris and arrogance is causing them to kind of completely lose sight of everything. The way he talks to his son and stuff like that. So there's some really clever and interesting ways that they're kind of juxtaposing all these kind of standpoints. On some level, obviously makes you more sympathetic, and then on the other levels, obviously it makes you really want to root for people like Nemec to survive, because they're the ones who have got this manifesto, and we're probably going to see that manifesto is going to be one of the most important documents in this era of the Star Wars saga. This will be the thing that is going to, I'm hoping anyway, is going to forge Andor into the person that we've started to just see instances that he's going to become. But also, I think it's going to get given to Mon Mothma at some point, and that, again, she's going to read that, and then that's going to be one of those moments where she's like, we need to not let this die, we need to carry this on, because this is really important.
Hey, this is Daniel Jose Older, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
There's something very pleasingly mundane about a lot of what we're seeing, because it's real life in the Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah.
Having breakfast, whether you're living in the opulence of Coruscant or concrete jungle that Cyril's in with his mother, that's fascinating. Guy getting ready for an important meeting, his kid being a disappointment. These are real world things, because so many of these, even him is he's a commandant fairly high up the chain on Aldhani, but in a galactic sense, he's nowhere on the ladder. It's very easy to look at the Empire, and you're kind of supposed to black hat, white hat when you're watching A New Hope. These are not black hat, white hat guys. They're all wearing grey hats, all of them. They're willing to do whatever it takes, which is commendable. But sometimes whatever it takes isn't the right or good thing to do. So there's a real interesting, compelling grey area where pretty much all of them live. And I think with the Imperials, most of them are open face. You can see them. They're relatable. They're just working guys. It goes back to Luke at the homestead looking at the twin sons, and everyone romanticizes that he's dreaming about joining the rebellion and going off to fight across the galaxy. But in the moment, he's dreaming about joining the Imperial Academy to become a TIE fighter pilot. That's the first goal, because he wants to get off Tatooine, and there's billions of people who just want to get off their Tatooine and get out there, and would end up in a system like this.
Like
Aldhani, they're stealing the quarterly payroll, which tells you they're getting paid. So who knows what they're getting paid, but it's the quarterly payroll. It's wages for people. It's a great way of putting a spanner in the works on Aldhani, which is the immediate issue, but there's a bigger issue beyond that. And I think it's just too easy to look at any Imperial and go, they're all Nazis. Because one of the things Andor is showing us is that, no, you can't just con the whole galaxy into becoming the mind of the Emperor. You've got to give it some sort of process, some sort of logic, some sort of ideology to get behind that regular people will go, well, that makes sense. We're keeping the peace. We're making planets better. We're doing this for a reason. We're not just taking over the galaxy because our evil galactic emperor wants us to do it. It's not Flash Gordon. I know Star Wars has a lot of Flash Gordon in it, but that's not what it is. There's a reason for these people doing what they're doing. As much as, like you say, with Nemec and his manifesto, you can see that bleeding out of season 1 and increasingly into season 2, because Cassian's got it in his hand now. It's the book that Rey rescues from the flaming fire on Acto, isn't it? For the Jedi.
Yeah,
those books are important. Yeah. This is the rebel version of one of those books. It's one of the journals of the wills for the rebels. This book, you can see it's going to become something important. It's
a book where people can rally around. I think we're going to see how that gets built on over the next couple of episodes of that. What do you make of everything that's going on with Mon Mothma and Coruscant? To be fair, it kind of does remind me of like some low-level parliamentary bill that you'd see on the parliamentary channel like 3:30 or something on a Wednesday or something.
Yeah.
on the grand scheme of things, it doesn't seem like it's that important. But even then, like, people don't seem to be at all interested in what she has to say.
It's an interesting scene because we're so used. One, it's fantastic to see that room again.
Yeah.
And two, every time you've seen that room before in all three of the prequels, it's been rammed to the gills because it was the Republic era and democracy was important and key to the running of the galaxy and close to the heart of all the people that were in that room for the most part. We know there was the bad apples that ended up, siding with Palpatine and everything else. But for the most part, that was a busy place that meant something. In this one, Mothma, like you say, it's 2 a.m. on a Thursday, just, in the House of Lords giving a speech to nobody but the 10 people watching on BBC 4 sort of thing. And she's looking around and one can see all the empty seats and two can see the general disinterest. And then you realise something's kicking off. That was fascinating. But yeah, I did like that. And also the obvious tie-in. And I really want to go back and watch it because it's been a long time since I have. The whole link into the Gorman massacre stuff. She's talking about the blockade of Gorman. Yeah. It just harkens back to the blockade of Naboo. You think you'd learn from history, but nobody ever does. They don't care. They're not interested. There's other stuff going on. You wonder how many of those in the Senate turn up to the Senate, are completely in the pockets of the people that they shouldn't be. I kind of half expected to see Bail Organa in that sequence. Certainly wanted to see E.T. I'm disappointed we didn't see E.T.
Yeah.
But yeah, juxtaposed against that scene she had in the previous episode, the breakfast scene with the daughter, stroppy teenager, so that's as it is. I was going to say it's a trope. It's not. It's reality for millions of parents. And you see what she's doing and she's still there grinding it out, essentially, as a senator and trying to keep her cover because we know from that conversation she had with Luthen in, I think, the 4th episode that she's nervous. I've got a lot on the line here. And you're thinking that when I heard that line the first time, I was a little bit taken aback because it seemed not selfish because she's putting a lot on the line, but it seemed a little bit self-interested. Well, whatever you're doing, I'm doing more. And then you see the next episode, she's got a twat of a husband, as my wife called him, awkward daughter at that table. But still, that's her family. Doesn't matter what or who or how they are, that's her family.
We've kind of seen Mon Mothma's personal life, and in some respects, a lot of TV shows, it would be the reverse. Clearly, she's the breadwinner. And, so often you'd have the breadwinner who is trying to balance their life with a disinterested wife and awkward teenager. So it's interesting to see it slightly reversed. Being perfectly honest, I think E.T. is totally in the pocket of Palpatine. I mean, I think he would have been one of the first, so...
Yeah, I think you're probably right. The heist, as you want to call it. We've seen heists in Star Wars before, most famously, I would say, in Solo. And that didn't go to plan.
Heists never do.
They never do.
I think that's the thing. And I think you could argue and say that it was a little bit predictable in respects of what kind of happened. It was always going to be a big gamble. Again, it's like, it's not about the big picture as such. If you want the big picture, that's where you watch the saga films.
Agreed.
And you look at, and you look at like the Battle of Endor or Battle of Hoth from a wider perspective. But I think this will be considered the first actual action by the Rebel Alliance. I think this is their very first, shall we say, victory, against the Empire. You can imagine all these other things that they're talking about, all the random acts, which are starting to suddenly be a little bit too random, have probably been put down to like local terrorists and stuff.
That cell on Lothal or somewhere like that.
Exactly, yeah. Who's worried about their own independence for their planet. Get the impression that this is the first event that it would be attributed to a group of rebels at the galactic level.
The end of the Eye, when they all get pulled back into ISB headquarters, no one's going home. We're all here to figure this out, and we're going to work this out. Major Partagas sort of gets them all there and cancels leave, and every star sector and every plan is, I need it ready by midnight. You can sense the nerves, and I wonder whether or not that's come directly from him, or whether he realises that Dedra Meero has actually said, and it's happening exactly as she said, or whether even somebody higher up the chain has noticed and sends the, poop rolls downhill, as they say. So maybe it's just got to Major Partagas and now he's letting his people at the ISB know this needs nipping in the bud right now. Where are we? We're still 5 years out from Rogue One at this point. Probably less now. I would imagine these episodes have taken place over a little chunk of time, but we're on that one, well on our way. And also Rebels is happening pretty much at the same time. So I'm very curious, especially now we know we're getting a lot of the Rebels crew in Ahsoka, which is obviously way after Jedi, but nevertheless, it's those characters. I'm just wondering if we'll either see some of that or certainly hear about it, because Rogue One was always good at sort of dropping little lines in, and we've seen plenty of little references to things in Andor so far, and it just feels like a cleverly written show that would take advantage of the fact that there's this whole Rebels storyline out there happening right now in other parts of the galaxy. Will end up being one of the strengths of Andor, is that you'll be able to tell Star Wars stories that complement what we already know and supplement and fill out and give more detail to, but don't necessarily have to cross paths with. There's no requirement at all to see any of the lead characters from the original trilogy in Andor. We certainly know we want to and need to see characters from Rogue One, and there is overlap. Mon Mothma's the obvious one, and as we move forward, you think, well, possibly Dodonna, maybe other characters, but there's no requirement really to do any of it because it's a monstrously big galaxy. That's, I think, a fan frustration, and a relevant and quite right fan frustration. All these things can happen. It doesn't have to be shown from the point of view of the same people. The ultimate end will be the same in the broadest strokes. And I'll point to a comic that's doing it fantastically well right now. The ongoing Star Wars comic, Charles Soule, is doing such a good job of building us up from Empire to Jedi. I mean, near a Jedi now, and layering in all these little moments that you know where they go, but it's presented in such a good way. It's an engrossing read. There's this storyline going on. What is teeing up's been out there 40 years, but it's so well done. Here, Rogue One, we know where this is headed, but it's just doing it in a really well-considered way.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
You watch these 3 episodes back to back, it has a different kind of meaning. And I think even after, that first initial reaction chat, I think I said, I'm glad I didn't have to sit and watch episode 2 on its own as a standalone episode, because it makes so much more kind of sense, and it makes it so much better to have that run of 3. And I think they needed to do that just to try and give a bit of confidence in the series. And obviously they haven't, I don't think they've needed to do this with episode 5. We should be able to see various different events through different lenses with different emphasis on different aspects of that event. It would be great if we could get a show whereby we see, or even if we just hear about, literally as a passing comment, somebody's robbed like Imperial Vault on Aldhani. It'd be great if it was just like, have you just heard that the rebels have just blown up the Death Star? But, see it from a perspective of a, Ferrix, and how people there take it, and how excited they are, or maybe worried they are, because they think that maybe now that, the Emperor is going to really tighten the yoke across the galaxy, and see how these big events that we see in the films can be played out differently across these different TV series, rather than having to have every single big event seen front and centre. It'd be great to see these different perspectives, or certain points of view, perhaps.
The heist, it goes badly wrong, but the end result is a success, like Rogue One. The end result was getting the Death Star plans out that tease up A New Hope and the future of the original trilogy and what happens within it. But as a mission, nobody got out. I mean, some
Not
people
really,
escaped, but really nobody got out, Well, and this is the story of the guy that gave it all, isn't it?
Well, exactly. To counter that, at what cost? What did they run away with? Is it 80 million?
80 million, give or take.
Yeah. But you think, for example, somebody like Lieutenant Gorn, what impact could he have had if he had survived? Could Nemric have gone on to have done if he hadn't have been crushed by the sheer weight of Imperial credits, which obviously is great meta storytelling there. And to be fair, that the Eye episode is just rammed full of all these symbols, and they extinguish a fire, and basically it happens at the same time as things start to go wrong with the Vault. And then as soon as the meteors start showering and that, it's like that is that new spark, and that's what gets them through it. But like I said, it's kind of like, at what cost is life, and that is the thing with the Rebel Alliance, isn't it? And that's what Nemric was talking about when he was saying at the beginning. He's there around the campfire trying to keep the fire alive, literally, but also figuratively. He's pretty much expected that, his faith in what he believes in would put him at ease, and actually now he's going into his combat, he's not sure whether or not it's kind of the right thing or the wrong thing to be doing, and so suddenly he's starting to question his own values. Jump to the end of that episode, and the one person that I'm really interested to see what actually happens to her is Sintra, because we see her walking out of that garrison in Imperial officers. She's crying. Now, she's visibly upset. Is that because she's been left behind, but I kind of get the feeling that that was always going to be part of the plan and always
Yeah.
going to be, the thing where she was expected. We don't see it, but I just wonder if she just annihilates that whole family and everybody up in that control room because they've seen her face. I just wonder if she's realised that actually these folk can't recognise me, so I'm going to have to kind of end them all. And obviously one of those was a kid, which again brings up the whole question of at what lengths will the rebels and the Rebel Alliance go to get their end goal.
End goals is a key there, I think, isn't it?
He's not, I don't think, naive. And I think that's the great thing about the Cassian characters. I don't think he's naive. He doesn't trust anyone. You can tell that by the way he speaks to Luthen and stuff like that. And so I think he basically saw right through Skeen. And even if Skeen had kind of said, hey man, yeah, don't worry, I was only joking, he wasn't. And I think he realises that. Val's in it for the sticking it to the Empire kind of quintessential rebel character. But I think Skeen would have happily taken shots at both of them in the back and just got the money. If there's only one person between you and a ship full of 80 million credits, and you know that you can fly that ship, at what point would you not actually think, to go and get my Mimar and Ferrix and what have you, and we could go anywhere. We could buy an island or half a planet or whatever, moon, for that amount of money, and just go and live there, out of the way. Money does interesting things to interesting people. I was generally kind of like surprised that he did it. And again, I think it's just kind of it came out of nowhere, which I thought was great.
Hi, this is Dave Chapman, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
What's your takeaway from The Axe Forgets and The Eye?
As another trilogy, they kind of work really well together, and I think they kind of play nicely. I think the one thing that I'm kind of actually starting to think, and obviously, he's the main character in the series, but I'm starting to wish to see a little bit more of what's going on with Mon Mothma. I don't necessarily feel like we got enough, really, and I'm really hoping that we can kind of get a little bit more of what's going on in Coruscant. It feels like they're skirting around stuff, and I kind of want them to really dip their toes in properly. We're starting to just get a rough idea of a picture of Coruscant, but I really would like to see more, and maybe even like a whole episode of stuff on Coruscant to really elevate what Luthen's doing, and also Mon Mothma, and if there's any kind of sympathisers. That being said, episode 6, I thought this was a really solid episode. I really enjoyed the different angles of like the TIE pilots in the cockpit. We're so kind of used to seeing this quintessential upper torso to head close up of TIE pilots, but they kind of kept a little bit loose, and actually you kind of realise there's a little bit more space in that kind of ball than actually I think people realise. Everything I thought was really well done, and I thought the pacing and cross-cutting between the natives and the Imperials and obviously what's going on with Vault was really well thought out and really kind of well structured. So for me, this is so far one of the best Star Wars TV episodes we've seen to date.
And that seems to be the general consensus, certainly of The Eye. Visually, action-wise, plot-wise, story-wise, just as a general presentation, it was hugely impressive. Definitely agree about Coruscant. It's a sort of treasured location anyway. Why wouldn't you want to see more of what's going on Coruscant at this point of history? Because like you say, we've just seen fairly limited stuff. We've seen Cyril's mother's house in that sort of concrete jungle area. We've seen the ISB headquarters and a few other bits. We've seen the Senate, which we're familiar with, but it would be interesting to see more. A bit like Rebels. Rebels Season 1 was pretty much all based around Lothal, and then we sort of moved out and got around the galaxy quite a bit more as the series moved on, but it was always the focus, the focal planet of that storyline. And I think we're going to see more of Ferrix, I'm sure of that. There's too many interesting characters there not to, but I hope as we progress, we do see more of Coruscant, more of other places. Cassian has got to have another meeting and come together with Luthen to sort of formalise and firm up what's happening next. It would be interesting to see if they have to pull him in again or whether he's willing to do it. There's a lot to play there. And also I think from a real world practical point of view, She-Hulk's now finished. Rings of Power is now finished. I know Willow's starting fairly soon, but at the moment, outside of House of the Dragon, Rick and Morty and Lower Decks, there's nothing massive to draw attention away from Andor. It's the first real week coming up that it's got a reasonably clear run at grabbing a lot of people's attention, because at the moment it does feel like it's been battling against a lot of other programs, a lot of other shows. So I'm really hopeful that now it's going to start getting over a bit more, that people can go back and start digging into it, because as a Star Wars show, it is unique in its earthiness. But I think as we move forward, we are going to see more stormtroopers. We are going to see more TIE fighters, plenty in this one. You know, you're going to see more of that Imperial machinery, which is just going to be fascinating. And there's nothing they can't show because the visuals are just so lush on this show. That's my hope as we move forward. I'm really curious to see, say, episode 7, we'll be talking about it later this week, feels like a bridging episode to the next chunk of stories. I'm curious to see whether that involves, and I hope it does, Saw Gerrera.
The one thing that actually I think this will actually could have a detrimental effect, as you were saying about how just like literally everything was just on, you know, was left on the screen and nothing was wasted, is how this now sits compared to, say, season 3 of Mandalorian. And we return to a TV production which is heavily featuring and revolving around the use of the volume. And are we going to suddenly kind of go, wow, Andor compared to Mandalorian just looks so much more authentic or polished? It's going to be really interesting to see how those two seasons line up.
It will, and the only thing I can think is that every season they've improved the volume because it's a new emerging technology, and season 2 was technically better than season 1, and all I can think is that season 3 either must or needs to be a step up from season 2. Not that season 1 and 2 weren't phenomenal, because they were, but it's been really refreshing to see clearly real world locations and being out there on location and doing what they've done to such great success in Andor. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to balance the two against each other, because you want Star Wars to have a consistency. There is a Star Wars-ness about the things that work so well, but you look at the visuals of the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the sequel trilogy, and they are separated. You know, the dream would be to go back and redo or touch up visuals on the original and the prequel trilogy to bring them up to the standards of the sequel trilogy, for example. But even there, we're now in that era of stagecraft, for example. There's other innovations coming. It'll never catch up unless they make the determination that they want to do it. So you've got what you've got. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how season 3 of Mando sits visually next to Andor. With the strong start Andor's had from that point of view, let alone the story, which is just engrossing in and of itself, it'll be very interesting to see how the two look, because the teaser trailer that came out for season 3 of Mando looked magnificent. So hopefully...
It looked phenomenal.
It really did.
But also, again, I think it's like it will go back to that slightly more busier episodes, shall we say. You know, I mean, action orientated. I mean, because actually, if you think about it, some of those episodes, like you think, you know, we had an episode where the Mandalorian was stuck on an ice planet with Frog Lady. But yeah, because it was so full of just action and, you know, X-Wings and quarry spiders and stuff like that, for the most part, you kind of skip over the fact that actually, generally, that nothing really massively happened in that episode. But then, you know, you have an episode where people kind of talking about the reason why they are where they are and their motivations for going on this heist, and people are like, well, nothing really happened, when actually, conversely, just because we haven't seen a blaster bolt or, you know, an X-Wing or giant spider, we had a single TIE fighter fly past. Apart from that, that episode probably had more character development for those characters than probably the whole of season 2 of Mandalorian combined.
And I think that ultimately, when we look back at Andor season 1, because season 2 just feels like it's got to start moving through the time. Well, it will moving through the timeline. There's historic things that it needs to touch upon. Other characters coming into the storyline and teeing up things that we know more than this one. Really, this one feels more about the development of Cassian. Whereas season 2 feels like it's going to be more about the history books of what happened leading up to Scarif and Yavin. We'll look back at season 1 and go, wow, if we get another Star Wars show with that kind of character development and motivation and sort of underpinning of what we know of a character, putting them into a space where we understand why they're doing what we're doing, we'll be very, very lucky. So hopefully that is something that comes out of Andor, above and beyond the amazing set design, the great performances and everything else. That's something that we get to carry forward. But the big trick, I think, is the balance between the quite adult, mature feel of a show like Andor that we've got to remember is all about building up to not just Rogue One, because Rogue One is the prequel to A New Hope, and it's all about filling in gaps of A New Hope. It's from the scroll up. So it's all about A New Hope, really, at this point. And that is a kid's film. You've got to make sure that all these elements at the moment that we're loving as adults, that are gritty and gripping and real world, waggling the air quotes, still fit within the confines of A New Hope, because that's the keystone of all of it. So if it doesn't fit with that, then really it doesn't work. It's a very interesting balance.
my mind boggles because we're now into prequels of prequels.
Yes.
You know, so here you go. Myself and Mark, I don't know why I keep on introducing him every episode as if he's joining me for the first time, because we know he's going to be here. Myself and Mark will be back to discuss and give our reactions to episode 7 of Andor.
If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Fanthatracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fanthatracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Temple for composing the Fanthatracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK, 4 PM Eastern, 1 PM Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday night at 7 PM UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks. And that's me done for this episode.
Until then, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe, take care, and may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.